Today we're going to talk about automation of Microsoft SPLA reporting. This live is for service providers that have to report their consumption to Microsoft on a monthly basis, on one hand. And on the other hand, they have to bill their clients to earn their money, to earn their buck. And the topic of automating that is not an easy one. And I've been in this business around Microsoft for over 30 years in various roles. I used to work very close with Microsoft, and in the last many years, I'm working against them on the side of service providers and enterprise organizations, helping them reduce headaches and costs connected to various aspects of Microsoft licensing. And service providers are in a unique position here. They're dealing with the same software, same Microsoft Windows Server, SQL Server, Microsoft Office, other Office applications, sometimes Visual Studio. But basically, it's mostly about operating systems and database and remote desktop access. Same software, but different rules, different licensing rules. It's a very important point. If you're not aware of that, stick with me. I'm going to talk about that. But also, the necessity to report and pay on a monthly basis. If an enterprise organization can afford being non-compliant or imprecise on certain, I would say, compliance positions, renewals happen every 3 years. If you are on a CSP program, renewals happen when your subscription expires, and organizations normally would have annual or 3-year subscriptions. So again, the cadence is not that pressing, and there is the software for enterprise organizations is just an expense. You invest in software, you install it, you use it, you adopt it, or you maybe don't use it. That's a different matter. I'd like to maybe discuss one day. In the service provider business, it is cost of service. It goes onto your cost of service. You charge for your services, partial cost is software, in addition to electricity, hardware, data center rent, and whatever else costs you may have, and the normal business costs. And obviously, almost everybody begins from just Excel tables, Excel spreadsheets, and approximating the numbers. If you've never been in an audit, and if you've been in a service provider business for longer than 3 years, you probably already had at least one audit. You've learned that on your own skin. And I supported over 100. I stopped counting at 100. Over 100 service providers in different audits. You then understand that it's not enough because it's not precise, and audits are precise. If somebody comes and counts your licenses, how many you had to pay to Microsoft, not just at the time, but also backwards, extrapolating from your current numbers, you know that there's no wiggle room. It's a precise calculation, and if you're not precise, you get that wake-up call, or maybe you're trying to sell your company and you want to have better numbers. You start thinking about automating. You start thinking about how we're going to solve this. And different organizations, different service providers go absolutely different ways. And amongst our clients, we had all kinds of scenarios. Some implement their own scripts. We can discuss that today as well. And some acquire tools. And here, it branches as well into dedicated tools specifically built for SPLA. And attempts to use, I specifically chose that word, attempts to use traditional software asset management tools to manage SPLA estate. And jumping a bit ahead, the best start you can get is to get a dedicated tool for SPLA that was built purposely for SPLA. And I'll explain why. But then it's not the end of the journey. And this is the hardest bit. The diagnostic question we ask every provider we engage with, either on audit defense or on SPLA management service, is: do you use your tool as a golden source of data for your end client billing? And we yet to hear a yes, a firm yes. Yes, this tool is used to at least calculate the basis for end client billing. And that is telling. That is telling because when you start digging why, you understand that is because the tool is not properly configured and maintained. There is no trust in the numbers. There is no dedicated process. I'm not saying even persons, dedicated process to maintain the tool in an always healthy state. So I want to go back to the scenario number one, your own scripts. It's not such a bad idea if you know what you're doing, if you understand the core principles. If you decide to go that way and develop your own solution, and we are planning also to release our scripts under an open source license, probably MIT, we're discussing this now. The scripts that we use to defend our clients against audits, which are actually better than any of the auditor's scripts. So you can write those scripts, but you need to understand the core principles. You need to understand that you can't write a script that only queries one particular configuration that is preset, that is known to you. Tooling, in-house tooling for such cases needs to account for all possible edge cases, for anything can go wrong. It must be very analytical. It must look in every single corner of the estate. It must scan everything. And it's just to give let me give an example. If you understand technical terms, if you calculate with your script the number of people who needs license to access remote desktop, you need to count all the security group members. I am yet to see a custom solution that does that. The custom solutions we've seen usually scan a subset of servers, so not everywhere. They don't account for mistakes, misconfigurations, forgotten servers, and they only count specific security groups. What about local groups? What about duplication of users? What about nested groups? What about, and this is what catches everybody, like in every audit, literally, I can put my signature under it. There is at least one server where all the domain users were added to remote desktop, and therefore, per the Microsoft rules, you must pay for every domain user for that server, or for that domain, for that end client. Whether you actually have to pay or it was a misconfiguration, that's a separate question. But if you get an audit at that particular point in time, when you have that misconfiguration, you're in trouble. It will be in the report, and you will have to negotiate it. You will have to convince Microsoft that it was an honest mistake. And they might even tell you, fine, don't pay us, just buy some Azure, and we'll forgive you your transgressions. So if you're building this solution, you need to have the necessary knowledge about edge cases, about how Microsoft software in the provider's environment is supposed to be licensed. Then you may develop such a solution, and it may be even better for you as opposed to paying for a tool's license. And that solution as well, as I will come back to that again and again and again, where automation fails not because it's not automated, not because it's not running, not because you didn't buy a tool. Automation fails because there's lack of support. You have to steer it. Same with the tools. Same with your own scripts. Make sure they work everywhere. Make sure you know what you're doing. But I want to move to the question of tooling. And I want to start from non-SPLA tools first, because that's the warning I continue repeating in every single live event we do on this subject. Non-SPLA tools, and you all know them, it's like Snow, Flexera, Uzu, big names, small names, doesn't matter. Non-SPLA tools are good at calculating Microsoft licenses in an enterprise environment, where rules of calculating Windows Server are entirely different, where rules of calculating SQL Server on a CAL basis are entirely different, where rules of calculating remote desktop users are somewhat different. Arguably, you can count differently than in a SPLA environment. And I can continue, but these are like the three most important parts. And you can't just take that tool, deploy it in a SPLA environment, and trust the numbers that it produces. And the most critical bit that is missing from that is how do you bill your clients? How do you calculate it per client? These tools don't support multi-tenancy. So if somebody approaches you from a large company that has been developing traditional SPLA tools, some tools, not SPLA tools, some tools, for years and years and years, and they tell you this is a fantastic deal, we're going to make it work for your SPLA, bring somebody, an expert in SPLA, to assess whether that's true or not really, because you can't afford not really. You will spend money on a license, on an expensive tool, and you won't get not just return on investment, you won't get anything. So you'll just waste the money. And in real life, what it turns into a massive political game afterwards, where people who invested in that tool by mistake now have to prove to whoever signs the check that it was the right decision. So it quickly escalates and explodes into an internal politics game, which I would, honestly, I would encourage you not to engage into. So your choices effectively is just between the scripts and the dedicated SPLA tools. And there aren't that many. So the choice is really not that vast. Less than fingers on this hand. Much fewer. And with those tools, remember what I said at the very beginning. We asked that question, do you use this tool as a golden source for your end client's billing? With those tools, there are other problems. Someone has to look after them. Unfortunately, that's in humans' mentality. Like, let me give you a remote example, very relevant to me. I'm trying to manage my weight and my health, as many people do. And I often fall into the trap of, I'm taking a gym membership, and then I'm happy, I have a gym membership. I don't go to the gym, I don't exercise, but I have membership. So I tick that box, I solved my problem. Buying a tool and even going through the POC is that gym membership. In the gym, you don't frequent. So think about it this way. Where those tools usually fail. Let me give you a very good picture so you really understand what I'm talking about. They fail at the point of POC, proof of concept, because that's what you normally get from a company that sells a tool. You will probably get either included or for a very reasonable small price, that POC where they deploy it, they help you implement it on a part of your infrastructure or on the infrastructure in that particular moment. And then there's no internal drive or resources or time or whatever, knowledge to then expand from that POC to the entire environment. Secondly, even if you did it, which it sometimes happens, it degrades at the same speed as you develop your IT estate, as you are on board new clients. Because you need to remember, if this is an agentic tool, if it requires a piece of software to be installed on every virtual machine or physical machine where your end clients host the software, you have to make sure that on a regular basis, and in SPLA, the reporting cadence is once a month, on a regular basis, at least monthly, go through all the reports and make sure that the tool sees everything. That's where it's effectively, I call it coverage rot. It's coverage degradation. New clients come in, new machines are deployed. If you deploy them, maybe you pre-install the agent. If they bring the virtual machine images, you don't have to talk to the end client and make sure that they install this agent if they want to be monitored. Then you start managing exclusions and all the other jazz. And when an auditor comes and you tell them, I have Octopus Cloud, for example, great tool, but if it doesn't cover enough of your estate, they will not accept that data. So that's another point, money wasted. Why did we pay for this tool? Why did we buy it if we can't even use it in audit defense? So that requires also looking after. And that is the second reason why those implementations fail. The third reason is that those tools are for legal requirements, and we develop our own solution, and we are basically going the same route. Purely from the legal point of view, these tools out of the box are eager. Let me give you an example. Microsoft Access Database Components or something like that. It's a tool that doesn't cost any money, but it must be deployed under certain conditions in a developer environment. So it's not like something you can deploy anywhere. Any sane tool would highlight it as a compliance risk and assign a Microsoft Access license to it, if not Microsoft Office license. That's the right thing to do from the tool's point of view. It needs to warn you that you have this problem, and if you ignore it, it just absolutely legitimately tells you have to pay for this usage if it's not a legitimate usage. So what you have to do with any tool like this out of the box, you have to exclude. And you can't just, I would encourage you, or let me rephrase it, I would discourage you very, what's the word I'm looking for? Let me stay on this phrase. I will discourage you from just excluding everything because you don't like it. For example, discourage you or excluding every SQL Server developer, because SQL Server developer by default is counted by such tools as SQL Server Enterprise. Again, correctly, because if it's not deployed by your end client, so you can't as a service provider provide SQL Server developer to your clients, they need to install it. It's just not, you're not licensed to do so, but they can. It's free of charge, but they have to install it and they have to use it only in non-production purposes. If it supports their CRM, then you're in a dispute whom to blame. And by default, if you read your SPLA, you're responsible to Microsoft for every single piece of Microsoft software. Doesn't matter who installed it. You have to then build a whole legal framework around it and prove that it wasn't you. You can't just say it wasn't me. You have to prove it. You have to have documental proof it wasn't you. So by default, SQL developer by such tools is counted as SQL Enterprise. And what happens in real life? A license manager in a service provider chooses such a tool, puts it in, goes through proof of concept is working nicely, starts looking after it, deploys the agents, and then they get overwhelmed by numbers they don't trust because you need to configure it further and you need to look after it on a regular basis. Someone deploys this SQL developer, before you didn't touch it, suddenly you have SQL Enterprise, and it's a very expensive piece of software. You go to your sales department and say, our client X deployed SQL Enterprise. And the sales department says, no, I can't tell them that. I can't charge them for it. Now you have to pay for it, or you have to deal with it, or you have to do something else about it. And people in those roles are not taken seriously enough by employing organizations. I must say it out loud. They're not taken seriously enough. And when they're not taken seriously enough, they're not given enough time and resource. They're not given help. They're not given external help. They can't pay for, go back to the organization that sold them the tool and buy their consulting services, or come to us and buy our consulting services. And they end up with numbers they don't trust. And then they start manipulating them. And on one hand, you have a very expensive piece of software. On the other hand, you maybe use that data as a vague reference to what you should be charging your own clients. And the auditors come. And you have to deal with auditors demanding exact numbers, precise numbers. You look at your tool and you think, I can't really release this data because 3 months ago, and it keeps the history. 3 months ago, we made a mistake in configuration. I can't disclose it to the auditors. And all kinds of things start happening. And then you have this question, either you ask it yourself or the people who signed the check tells you, but we have a tool. But it doesn't work. So automation itself, in a way how it's approached right now by the majority of the service providers, and I'm sorry, I know, I may be insulting you, I may be, but I'm yet to see, I want to see this. I want to see a working solution that is looked after. How it's approached by the majority of service providers is only done halfway. It's possible to automate a lot of it. For example, it's possible to automate everything. It's easy, relatively, to automate deploying agents to new virtual machines. Anyone who's been in the Windows Server ecosystem for a while and has some sysadmin education and experience could make that happen. So that side of things, you still need to look after it because errors happen. But the majority of this can be solved in an automated way. You need to put an effort into that and still look after it. But things like micromanagement of licenses. Who, for example, logs into the tool each time an end client brings new software, finds that software on that server, that particular software, and flags that as, this is end client's license and here's the evidence. You need that. And I keep talking audits. It's not all about the audits. Again, it's about your money. It's about your money, because what if that client legitimately wanted to deploy that software, they legitimately wanted to start paying to you, and they just forgot to tell? What we find, even in geographies with what we traditionally see as like dodgy cultures, there's this strange misconception that there are dodgy cultures. No. We see, completely regardless of the geography, that when an end client is informed that they did something wrong, or the configuration was incorrect, or they need to bring a license, they don't run away. They don't shut the door. And that small percentage of problematic clients, I would use a soft word here, which is roughly between 1% and 3%, who actually behave like this. It's not geography dependent. We saw this in the United States. We saw this in continental Europe, everywhere all over the world. And we work with 30 different countries in our team. Clients respond well when you have a story. Don't be afraid to go to the client and say, well, actually, you're paying for 8 SQL Server instances, but you have 16. Do you want us to sort this out somehow? Because you either have to pay or you have to get rid of them. Or you deploy SQL Server services. Many are unaware that you have to pay a full license for separately installed services. How are we going to deal with this? But when you don't have that visibility, when your automation isn't automated. So one of the main messages I want you to take away is that deploying a tool, even going through the proof of concept deployment, even if it worked for a few first months, is not automation. It's not automated. It needs to be looked after. And I would even go and say even harder, as my business partner Daryl said in one recent live event when we spoke about audits, if you can't afford maintaining the tool, if you can't afford maintaining an automated position, maybe you shouldn't even consider it, because otherwise it's just window dressing. I know it may be harsh and rude, but it's window dressing. You're not automating anything. You're not solving anything. And if you don't want to look after it, maybe it's the wrong business. Maybe you should kind of get rid of SPLA and move everything to CSP hosting, or bring your own license. It's possible, by the way, since 2022, to have a small provider estate, reasonable. If you're an MSP, for example, you don't need SPLA. You can sell CSP licenses to your end clients and host those licenses in this estate, purely legitimately. No SPLA, no monthly reporting headache, no SPLA audits. You just hosting, bring your own license. It is legitimate, completely compliant. Maybe that's what you want. So, and yeah, by all means, don't even consider traditional SAM tools. They just don't work. Let me go through my notes. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. So I think I have a question. Yeah, good example with gym membership. Thanks for that, Glenn. It is exactly that. Guilty as charged. Paying for gym, only going there maybe twice a month. But the box is ticked. I have a gym membership. Still too much weight. We're all humans, aren't we? Just looking at my notes, I have quite a few notes for this live, just not to forget something. But I think I've said the majority of it. Let me talk about another thing, another aspect of tools, and I mentioned it very quickly, not necessarily related to automation, but related more to accuracy of management, and having that ability to look to see mistakes is that the tools, dedicated SPLA tools, maintain historic data, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing. So maintaining historic data helps in audits, as long as you know, or you are sure that you've done things correctly. Historic snapshots help fight approximation. You know how many times we had to push back on auditors? Twice a week? Right now, in the current cadence of audits that we manage, twice a week we have the same exact conversation. Can you please recalculate this position from the day when the software was installed? Or can you please remove consumption for this service in 2023, because here's an invoice, the server was only deployed in 2025. What they do is they take the current snapshot in an audit and they approximate it back. They kind of assume by all the dates and other pieces of data that this SQL, for example, has been in this estate for 16 years. They assume. And therefore, how do you fight those assumptions? By providing data. Either invoices or data from a tool. And if you can prove to them that you have a working installation of, I don't know, SPLA Manager, then you can use that for your defense. I mean, I wish I would see that at least once. Someday, fingers crossed, on two hands, someday there will be a provider that will call us and say, certify, that we're good for this audit. We have a tool and it's working. And I'll come there and say, you know what, guys, brilliant, congratulations, fantastic work. Keith, yeah, good question. How often is the service provider client tracking consumption and reconciling with the service providers? Ooh, we're dealing with an audit in Asia Pacific region right now, where a lot of the software is hosted, and I wish the provider communicated to the client, to the end client, large organization. I wish they communicated that there were some discrepancies. Not often. So again, a good tool that has this as a dedicated module would help that. But you still need to look after it. You need to look after each client. Imagine you have hundreds of clients. You still need to look after them all, depending on what sort of services you provide. And then you will get, I would never say take that bill from the system, from the tool, and press a button and send it to the end client, because you'll probably want to, first of all, charge them your own rates, because you're not just reselling licenses. You can't even resell licenses. But if you had that reporting, at least for internal purposes, so your sales department would get those reports in an automated way on a specific date, and they would be sure that that the date is correct, when there's trust, organizational trust. That would also help reconcile it with the end clients, because if the end client suddenly receives a bill, and another thing you can do, not to shock the client, is to have like mid-month reconciliations. And if there's a sudden spike in usage, you can message your end client via your sales department and say, you're going to pay twice as much next month. Are you sure that's what you wanted? And that helps preventing honest mistakes, or if that was intended, you can it's your additional income. Think about it this way. So, how do you reconcile with your provider if they don't have it automated? How do you reconcile as an end client with your service provider if they don't have process, people, and tools in place, even scripts? I wish that was happening more often. The thing is, though, this is one of those things where we can't insist that compliance and costs is somewhere in the top 3. It will always be lagging behind, somewhere in the top 10, but it doesn't mean it needs to be neglected. I hope Keith at least somehow answered your question. Yeah. Anyone? Yeah, I mean, by all means, ask questions. Yeah, as you've just seen, I'll take them. Yes, we are providing these services. And yes, I would love every provider to come to us and buy that service from us. But the message I'm saying right now is not only because we want the money. You need somebody with experience and knowledge to look after even the most sophisticated automated solution. And I would even put it this way: the more sophisticated it is, the more sophistication it probably requires from the team that looks after it, internal or external. And in the ideal circumstances, you need an internal champion and some kind of external support, scaled for your particular needs. It could be 1 hour a month, it could be multiple hours a month, it could be complete outsourcing. And you can get it from some of the tooling companies. But normally I would probably just suggest have a mix. Get some basic support from the tooling company, don't neglect it, and have some additional support from an expert in SPLA. That's how you get there. That's how you get to the point when everybody's convinced. And it's not like a one-click thing as well, because the longest journey is convincing your C-level, your sales, your other departments that the numbers you deliver are the actual numbers, that they should really take them into account. And unlike traditional software asset management, as I said at the very beginning, service providers are in a unique position where fluctuations per month affect your bottom line immediately. Immediately. And this is why you can't afford slugging. The non-compliance is never malice. Just going through all the, as I said, over 100 different cases. Have I ever seen somebody as a service provider deliberately being non-compliant? No. I may imagine they may exist, but no. All the time, when we see non-compliance, it's because of misunderstanding Microsoft licensing rules. So you need somebody or a tool that knows particular SPLA rules, or lack of time, which results, by the way, often in flat numbers. And when Microsoft sees flat numbers reported per month, no IT status static, it's a red flag. You get on the audit list, you get on the naughty list if you report the same numbers, or if you have a sudden spike, which is not necessarily bad, but if, for example, you had a flat line and then suddenly you spiked. I would say I would choose you as a candidate. If I were Microsoft, I would choose you as a candidate for an audit. Because what it tells them is that you're not looking properly after your estate. And they're not coming after penalties in audits. They want revenue. And the discussion most often will be about, let's discuss how you're going to sort this out, moving on with value as a partner. So your value is another $1 million a year on Azure costs, which you have to agree to. That was it. So the reasons why automation fails, let me reiterate them, to deliver on the promise, is unfinished POCs, not looking after the agents. This is the main reasons. And not looking after the actual license micromanagement nitty-gritty. This is why this whole automation just falls apart. You have a tool, it counts something, but your entire organization works from different numbers because God knows what the tool does. And effectively, it doesn't even matter what the tool is. Well, as long as it's dedicated for SPLA. So as a purely just like closure that I have to do as a person that runs their own business, we know how to do it. We support all the tools. We're very tool agnostic. We can even help you build a solution if you by mistake bought Snow or Flexera and decided to manage your estate. There are ways with additional add-ons and scripts and database connectors to make it work for SPLA. Not out of the box, so that's always a custom solution. And most importantly, we will also provide full consulting support with our experience in SPLA. As you may imagine, we know how it works. We know how auditors think. We know what mistakes providers make, and how to avoid them, and how to solve them, how to write proper, legal base. So, you know where to find us. There's a QR code here. And if you have any more questions, happy to take them. I'll probably be spend another 3 minutes just browsing through my notes whilst you're thinking of your questions. Promise versus reality. You bought the tool to solve SPLA. Yeah, exactly. Now, a tool provides false sense of achievement as that gym membership. As I said, I wish. Yeah. I think everything that I wanted to say today I said. There's no reason to waste your time over any minute longer. If you want to read about it, you suddenly just stumbled upon this live event. You have no idea who we are, what we do. Again, the QR code is here. Go on our website, SAMexpert.com. There's a whole library of articles about SPLA. The majority of other articles on the internet, and I'll say something arrogant now, the majority of the articles about SPLA on the internet are copies of our articles, or derived with AI from what we write. Read about it, study it, think about it. If you have questions, you know where to find us. And on that fantastic note, I wish you all the very best in managing your estates, in managing your finances, in running a successful service provider business. So thank you very much. Keith, thank you for this comment. Your point is correct. If Microsoft licensing, is Microsoft licensing a core competency for your company? If not, then outsource, then function. Yeah, thanks, Keith. It's very sane. Thanks again. Have a great rest of the week. And we'll see you again on SAMexpert TV or maybe on a face-to-face call. All the best.